The air in the Senate Intelligence Committee hearing room was not just stale, it was pressurized. It felt less like a legislative chamber and more like the inside of a submarine diving past its crushed depth. Every seat in the gallery was occupied, a sea of suits, press badges, and curious onlookers who had queued since dawn. Along the back walls, staffers stood shoulder to shoulder, their eyes glued to the center of the room. The cameras from CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and C-SPAN formed a mechanical phalanx. Their lenses zoomed in tight, ready to capture every micro-expression, every bead of sweat, every twitch of an eyelid. This was not a routine oversight hearing. This was political theater of the highest order, but the script was about to be rewritten in real time. On one side of the mahogany dais sat the Senate Intelligence Committee. Among them sat Senator Adam Schiff, the former chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, a man who had built a national brand on the promise of secret evidence and the specter of foreign collusion. He sat with the relaxed, almost bored confidence of a man who had leaked to the media hundreds of times without consequence. He adjusted his microphone, smoothed his tie, and looked over his reading glasses with the air of a prosecutor preparing to dispatch a petty criminal. He had his talking points. He had his narrative. He had the media waiting to amplify his sound bites. On the other side, sitting alone at the witness table, was Tulsi Gabbard. She was the newly confirmed Director of National Intelligence, DNI. She wore a dark navy suit that was sharp, professional, and unpretentious. On her lapel was a simple American flag pin. She sat with the stillness of a statue, her hands resting on the table, her posture perfect. The unmistakable, rigid discipline of a soldier who had spent 20 years in the Army National Guard. There was no fidgeting, no nervous shuffling of papers, no whispering to aides. The straight back, the level gaze, the calm readiness of someone who had trained for combat defined her presence. In front of her sat two items, stark against the polished wood. A classified binder marked Top Secret, SCI, and a leather folder containing declassified documents. She had come prepared for war. Senator Mark Warner, the chairman, called the hearing to order at precisely 10:00 a.m. The gallery quieted as the gavel struck. Senator Warner gave the standard opening remarks about the gravity of the threats facing the nation and the importance of oversight. Then, the moment everyone had tuned in for arrived. He turned to the ranking member to allow opening statements. Adam Schiff was ready. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman," Schiff began, his voice taking on that grave, portentous tone he used when he wanted to sound like the guardian of the Republic. "Director Gabbard, I want to start by saying that your nomination raised serious concerns among many in the intelligence community." Tulsi's expression didn't change. She had expected this. Schiff continued, warming up to his rhythm. "Your past statements regarding Syria and Russia, your skepticism about intelligence community assessments, these raise legitimate questions about your judgment. You have demonstrated a pattern of defending authoritarian regimes, of parroting Kremlin talking points, of questioning American intelligence while accepting the word of our adversaries." He paused for effect, making direct eye contact with the cameras, ensuring the clip would be perfect for the evening news. "Some might say," Schiff said, measuring his words carefully, "and I am not making this accusation directly, but some intelligence professionals have suggested that your positions align suspiciously well with Russian interests, that perhaps, whether intentionally or not, you have been compromised by Russian influence operations." The room went deadly silent. Schiff had just accused the Director of National Intelligence, a lieutenant colonel and combat veteran, of being a Russian asset. He had done it under oath, on the record, live on national television. Schiff sat back, looking satisfied. He expected the usual response: outrage, shouting, a defensive scramble to deny the allegations. He expected her to crumble or to lash out in a way that would make her look unstable. But Tulsi Gabbard didn't flinch. In fact, she smiled slightly, the kind of small, cold smile a poker player gives when they realize their opponent has gone all in on a bluff. "Senator Schiff," she said. Her voice was calm, clear, and steady, cutting through the silence of the room. "That is a very serious accusation to make under oath." Schiff frowned slightly. This wasn't the script. "I said some professionals have suggested—" He began to backtrack. "No, Senator." Tulsi interrupted gently, but with the stopping power of a concrete wall. "You said my positions align suspiciously well with Russian interests. You suggested I might be compromised by Russian influence operations. Those aren't hypotheticals. Those are accusations." She reached out and placed her hand on the black binder. "As Director of National Intelligence, I have access to all intelligence," she said. "All of it. Every assessment, every report, every piece of classified information about foreign influence operations, including any intelligence regarding me." She looked directly at him. "Do you have any evidence for that claim? Any intelligence whatsoever suggesting I am compromised by Russia?" Schiff shifted in his seat. "Your public statements speak for themselves." "No, Senator," Tulsi said, her voice harder now, filled with steel. "You just accused me of being compromised by Russia, under oath, in a Senate Intelligence Committee hearing." She leaned forward slightly. "That is either true, which means you have intelligence supporting it and should present it immediately, or it is false, which means you just committed perjury in your opening statement." The silence in the room was absolute. "Which is it, Senator?" Schiff looked trapped because he was trapped. He had insinuated treason without a shred of proof, forgetting that the woman sitting across from him now held the keys to the entire intelligence library. He had brought a knife to a gunfight, and Tulsi Gabbard had just clicked off the safety. The atmosphere in the hearing room had shifted from a political debate to a crime scene investigation. Adam Schiff sat frozen, his mouth opening and closing slightly, unable to produce the evidence Tulsi Gabbard had demanded, because it simply didn't exist. He had played the secret evidence card for years, but now he was sitting across from the person who ran the deck. Tulsi didn't let him recover. She didn't let the moment breathe. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small metallic object. She placed it on the table with a soft clink. It was her combat medical badge. "I was in Iraq in 2005, Senator," Tulsi said. The interruption was quiet but absolute, like a door closing on his political career. "Forward Operating Base Anaconda, Field Medical Unit. We operated under regular mortar attacks. The ground would shake while we were trying to treat patients." She held up the badge. The silver medal caught the harsh television lights. "I earned this badge treating soldiers under enemy fire," she said. "Do you know what this means, Senator?" Schiff hesitated. Of course, he didn't know. He had never served a day in uniform. He had never marched, never deployed, never risked anything more than a bad poll number. "It means I was there when insurgents attacked our base," Tulsi answered for him. "It means I was there when soldiers came in bleeding from IED strikes, their bodies torn apart by explosives. It means we had to make decisions about who might live and who would die in the span of seconds. Real decisions, Senator. Life and death. Not political theater for cable news." She set the badge down, facing him, a silent accuser. What did you sacrifice, Senator? The question cut through the room like a blade. It wasn't an argument. It was a moral indictment. Tulsi's voice was quiet, but it carried the authority of someone who had seen the cost of war firsthand. Excuse me, Schiff stammered. What did you sacrifice for this country while I was in Iraq under enemy fire? Tulsi repeated. Where were you while soldiers died protecting America? What were you doing while intelligence officers held the line against our enemies? She leaned forward slightly. While those soldiers came home in coffins, you went on television. You sat in makeup chairs. You leaked classified information. You lied about evidence you never had. You advanced your career. So, I am asking you directly, she said. What did you sacrifice, Senator? What did it cost you? What did you risk? What did you give? Adam Schiff opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. There was no good answer. He couldn't claim he sacrificed his time, or his energy, or his reputation, because in the face of blood and death, those things meant nothing. The silence stretched for seconds that felt like hours, 42 seconds of dead air that would be replayed on screens around the world for years to come. Tulsi let the silence hang there, heavy and suffocating, before she moved to destroy his credibility once and for all. Let me help you understand the position you are in, she said, opening the leather folder containing the declassified documents. In 2017, you went on MSNBC specifically and told Chuck Todd that you had seen more than circumstantial evidence of collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia. She nodded to the committee staff. A screen behind her flickered to life. There was Schiff, sitting across from Chuck Todd, his face grave and serious. I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now. Tulsi let the clip play out. Then another. Schiff on CNN with Jake Tapper. Schiff on ABC with George Stephanopoulos. Schiff on CBS. I have 47 documented instances of you claiming to have evidence, Tulsi said, holding up a timeline her staff had prepared. 47 times you told the American people you had seen proof of collusion. She set down the timeline and picked up a heavy, bound report. Then, in April 2019, the Mueller report came out, she said. 22 months of investigation, 40,019 lawyers, 2,800 subpoenas. She opened the report to a tabbed page. Conclusion: the investigation did not establish that members of the Trump campaign conspired or coordinated with the Russian government. She looked up at him. That is not my interpretation, Senator. That is a direct quote. Page 2, Volume 1. You said you had evidence of collusion. Mueller said there was no collusion. So, we are left with a simple binary choice. Either Robert Mueller, with his team of 19 angry prosecutors and 500 search warrants, somehow missed the direct evidence that you claim to have seen. She paused, letting the implication land. Or you were lying. Schiff shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting around the room. The Mueller report documented numerous contacts. Contacts are not collusion, Tulsi snapped. You said evidence of a crime. You said conspiracy. You lied to the American people for 2 years to score political points. The difference between us, Senator, she said, is that I have actually read the intelligence. I have actually held a security clearance while serving in combat. I have never claimed to have evidence I didn't possess. And I have never lied to the American people about classified information. You did. For years. And now, she concluded this round, you have the audacity to question my fitness to serve. Maybe you should explain why anyone should believe a single word you say ever again." The hearing room had transformed from a legislative session into a tribunal. Adam Schiff looked diminished, shrinking into his high-backed leather chair as the weight of his own words was used to bury him. But Tulsi Gabbard wasn't finished. She had exposed the lies. Now she was going to expose the crime. "Senator," Tulsi said, reaching for a new stack of documents, "let's discuss your approach to intelligence oversight. Specifically, let's discuss the FISA abuse." She slid 2 documents across the table. "February 2018, she began. Representative Devin Nunes, then chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, released a memo exposing FBI abuses in the FISA process. He detailed how the FBI used the unverified Steele dossier, paid for by the Clinton campaign, to obtain warrants to spy on an American citizen, Carter Page." She pointed to the second document. "You, Senator Schiff, released a counter-memo. You called the Nunes memo a transparent effort to undermine the Russia investigation. You said it was deliberately misleading. You claimed the FBI acted properly." Tulsi then pulled out a massive report, the Inspector General's report on FISA abuse. Inspector General Michael Horowitz found 17 significant errors and omissions in the FISA applications. He found that the FBI withheld exculpatory evidence. He found that an FBI lawyer literally altered an email to frame Carter Page. He found that the Steele dossier was unverified garbage. "Devin Nunes was right," Tulsi said. "You were wrong. The FBI lied to a secret court, and you covered for them." Schiff tried to interject. "I was relying on the Justice Department." "You were the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee," Tulsi shot back. "You had access to the same raw intelligence Nunes had. You saw the same applications. You either were too incompetent to spot the fraud, or you lied about it to protect the narrative." She didn't wait for his answer. She signaled to the gallery. "I want to introduce you to someone, Senator," Tulsi said. A man in the second row stood up. He was in his late 50s, wearing a gray suit, but standing with the undeniable posture of a career military officer. "This is Colonel Robert Henderson," Tulsi said. "Retired, 26 years of service, combat deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, intelligence officer." "Colonel," Tulsi asked, looking at the man, "you held top-secret SCI clearance for 22 years, correct?" "Yes, ma'am," the colonel replied, his voice booming without a microphone. "Have you ever leaked classified information?" "Never, ma'am." "Why not?" "Because that would be a criminal violation of the Espionage Act," the colonel said. "I would go to prison. I would lose my pension. I would dishonor my oath." Tulsi turned back to Schiff. "Colonel Henderson has spent his entire adult life serving this country. He lived in shipping containers. He missed birthdays and funerals. He guarded secrets with his life." She pulled out a declassified FBI 302 form, a summary of an interview with a witness. "But you leaked, Senator," Tulsi said, holding up the document. "This is a sworn statement from a Democratic staffer who worked for you. He told the FBI that you authorized leaks to the media. He told the FBI that when he warned you it was illegal, your staff replied, 'Don't worry, we won't get caught.'" The room gasped. It was the smoking gun. "You leaked classified information to damage a political opponent," Tulsi said, "and nothing happened to you. No investigation, no prosecution, no prison time. You kept your committee seat. You got elected to the Senate." She leaned over the table, invading his space. "This is the double standard that is destroying the trust in our institutions. If a soldier like Colonel Henderson leaks a document to expose a lie, he goes to Fort Leavenworth. If a politician like you leaks a document to get a segment on MSNBC, you get a book deal." She pointed at the colonel, who remained standing, a silent sentinel of integrity. Colonel Henderson sacrificed his youth. He sacrificed his safety. He sacrificed his family time. What did you sacrifice? Did you sacrifice your freedom? No. You are free. Did you sacrifice your career? No. You were promoted. Did you sacrifice your wealth? No. You are a millionaire. You sacrificed nothing, Tulsi said. You sacrificed the truth. You sacrificed the integrity of this committee. And you did it all while hiding behind a security clearance that men like Colonel Henderson actually earned. She gathered the FISA documents and the FBI report, stacking them neatly on the table. "Soldiers go to prison for what you did," she said. "That is the reality. And until you face the same justice they do, you have no business questioning anyone's patriotism." Schiff looked at the colonel, then quickly looked away, unable to hold the gaze of a man who had lived the oath Schiff had only spoken. The contrast was devastating. The honorable soldier standing in judgment of the corrupt politician. The room knew the verdict before a single gavel banged. The hearing room was now fully under Tulsi Gabbard's operational control. The Democratic senators on the dais, who had initially planned to interrupt and derail her testimony, were now silent, some looking at their phones, others staring blankly at the wall, unwilling to intervene in a political massacre. Adam Schiff looked isolated, a man stranded on an island while the tide rose around him. Tulsi opened a new section of her files. This stack was even thicker than the last. It contained congressional records, impeachment transcripts, and newly declassified intelligence reports regarding Ukraine. "Senator Schiff," she began, her tone shifting from the sharp accusation of a prosecutor to the forensic precision of an intelligence analyst. "You led the first impeachment of President Trump. You stood in the Senate chamber just down the hall and made your case as the lead House manager in January 2020. She reached into the file and pulled out the articles of impeachment, holding them up for the cameras. The document was stiff, formal, a piece of history that she was about to dismantle. "The charges were abuse of power and obstruction of Congress," she recited. "The basis was a phone call between President Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky, in which Trump asked Ukraine to investigate corruption involving Hunter Biden and the energy company Burisma." Tulsi held up the transcript of the call. "You called this a quid pro quo. You called it a baseless conspiracy theory. You stood before the Chief Justice of the United States and said Trump was soliciting foreign interference against a political rival based on lies." She set down the transcript and picked up a folder marked with the official seal of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. "As DNI," Tulsi said, "I have access to the intelligence you saw as House Intel Chair. I have access to information about Ukraine, about Burisma, and about the Biden family's business dealings." The intelligence community had documented extensive corruption in Ukraine's energy sector, Tulsi said, opening the folder. "Specifically regarding Burisma Holdings. We know the company hired Hunter Biden, a man with zero experience in energy and zero experience in Ukraine, for $50,000 a month. We know this happened while his father, Vice President Joe Biden, was running Ukraine policy for the Obama administration." She looked at Schiff, her eyes narrowing. "You saw this intelligence, Senator. You knew about the corruption. You knew that Trump's concerns weren't baseless conspiracy theories. They were based on documented reality." She pulled out more recent revelations, IRS whistleblower testimony, FBI FD 1023 forms, and messages from the authenticated laptop that Schiff had tried to suppress. We now know Hunter Biden referred to 10% for the big guy. We know Burisma executives asked him to use his influence to stop investigations. We know Joe Biden pressured Ukraine to fire the prosecutor investigating Burisma by withholding $1 billion in loan guarantees. Her contempt was palpable, vibrating through the microphone. Everything Trump suspected was true. "And you knew it," she said. "You had the intelligence. You sat on the committee. You saw the same reports the FBI saw. You knew Burisma was a corrupt organization using the vice president's son as a shield." "But you impeached him anyway," Tulsi said, her voice rising. "You impeached a president for asking about actual corruption, while you hid the intelligence that proved he was right." She signaled to the gallery. A man in a suit stood up, looking uncomfortable but resolute. "Congressman Davis," Tulsi said, "you were on the House Oversight Committee during the impeachment. You voted against it. Why?" "Because the evidence didn't match the charges," the congressman said, his voice carrying clearly. "We saw evidence of Biden family corruption. We saw that Hunter Biden was unqualified. We believed the president had a legitimate reason to ask questions about where American money was going." "And how did Chairman Schiff handle that evidence?" Tulsi asked. "He suppressed it," Davis said bluntly. "He wouldn't let us call witnesses. He wouldn't let us introduce evidence about Burisma. He ruled it all irrelevant. He ran a kangaroo court." Tulsi thanked him and turned back to Schiff. "You led a prosecution based on a lie, Senator. You told the country that asking about Biden's corruption was an impeachable offense, even though the corruption was real." "But there is more," she said. "Let's talk about the whistleblower." She pulled out a timeline of the impeachment inquiry. The Ukraine whistleblower filed his complaint in August 2019. He claimed Trump's call was inappropriate based on second-hand information. "Then we found out," Tulsi said, reading from a report, "that your staff met with the whistleblower before the complaint was filed. They coordinated with him. They helped shape the complaint." She played a video clip on the screen. It was Schiff on Morning Joe, September 2019. "We have not spoken directly with the whistleblower." Tulsi stopped the video. "Lie. Your staff had multiple contacts. You knew about the complaint before it was filed. You coordinated the rollout to inflict maximum political damage. Just like the Russia collusion, just like the FISA abuse, just like the classified leaks, the pattern is clear," Tulsi said. "You lie. You manipulate. You use your position to advance political narratives regardless of the truth." She leaned forward, her eyes burning with intensity. "You stood in the Senate chamber. You wore a flag pin. You called yourself a defender of the Constitution. You demanded the removal of a sitting president. But you were the one lying about Russia. You were the one lying about Ukraine. You were the one lying about the whistleblower." She pulled out the final document for this section, the Senate acquittal vote. February 2020. "The Senate voted not guilty," she said. "Your impeachment failed. It failed because it was built on a foundation of sand. It was built on the lies you had been telling for 3 years. You dragged the country through a nightmare," she said. "You divided us. You weakened us on the world stage. You made us look like a banana republic, where political opponents are targeted with fake investigations. And you did it all for power. You never sacrificed anything, Senator," she concluded. "You just took. And now you sit here, lecturing me about integrity? The only thing you have proven today is that you have none." Schiff looked like he had gone 12 rounds with a heavyweight. His defenses were shattered. His narrative was in ruins. But Tulsi Gabbard was methodical. She wasn't leaving anything to chance. She reached for a document that carried the weight of history, an official House resolution. "Senator Schiff," she said, her voice dropping to a somber register, "let's talk about June 21st, 2023. A date that should have ended your political career." She held up the document. House Resolution 491. Resolution to censure Representative Adam Schiff. The first censure of a House Intelligence Committee chairman in history. One of only a handful of censures in the 21st century. Tulsi read the title aloud, letting the formal legislative language fill the room. Censuring and condemning Adam Schiff, representative of California's 30th Congressional District. The charges, she listed: abusing his position of trust and authority, misleading the American people by claiming evidence of collusion that did not exist, exploiting access to classified information. She looked at him. "Your own House of Representatives," she said. "Your colleagues, the people who worked with you every day. They voted to officially condemn you. 213 members voted yes." "It was a party line vote," Schiff muttered, a weak attempt to dismiss the stain on his record. "It was a majority," Tulsi corrected. "It is in the congressional record forever. History will record that you were censured for lying." She pulled out the original text of the resolution, the version before it was amended. "The first version included something interesting, Senator," she said. "A fine. $16 million. She let the number hang there. "That is what they calculated your lies cost the American people. The cost of the Mueller investigation, the cost of the impeachment inquiry, the cost of the lawyers and the special counsels." The resolution stated, "Representative Schiff shall pay a fine of $16 million to the United States Treasury as restitution for the harm caused by his actions." Tulsi shook her head. Republicans dropped the fine because they knew it wouldn't pass with it included. But they wanted to make a point. Your lies had a cost. A measurable, quantifiable cost to the taxpayer. She played a video clip from the House floor on the day of the censure. It showed Schiff standing in the well of the House as the Speaker read the condemnation. It showed the Republicans chanting, "Shame, shame." It showed the Democrats chanting, "Adam, Adam," trying to drown out the verdict. "How did it feel, Senator?" Tulsi asked. "Standing there while the Speaker of the House read a resolution stating that you lied to the American people? Did you feel shame? Did you feel regret? Did you feel the weight of your failure? Or did you just calculate how to spin it for your Senate fundraising?" She called one last witness for this segment. "Congressman Williams," she said to the man in the gallery, "you sat on the House Intelligence Committee with Representative Schiff. You voted for the censure. Why?" "Because he broke the trust," the congressman said simply. "The Intelligence Committee only works if we trust each other. We work in a skiff. We can't talk to the press. We rely on the chairman, to be honest." Adam Schiff would leave the CF, walk to a camera, and say things that were completely contradicted by what we had just heard inside. He used the secrecy of the committee to lie without fear of contradiction. "That is why I voted to censure him," Williams said. "He abused his power." "Your own colleagues couldn't defend you on the merits," she said. "They defended you on process. They defended you with politics. But they couldn't defend the lies. 213 members of Congress officially condemned you." She leaned forward for the hook. "Your reputation was already gone. Your credibility was destroyed. So what did the censure cost you? I'll tell you what it should have cost, she said, her voice hard. It should have cost you your career. It should have cost you your security clearance. It should have cost you your pension. In the military, she said, if an officer is censured for lying, they are relieved of command. They are processed out. Their career is over. Dishonorable discharge. But you are a politician, she said with disgust. So you survived. You wore the censure like a badge of honor. You fundraised off of it. You got elected to the Senate. You sit on this committee today, passing judgment on me, while carrying the mark of official condemnation for being a liar. She gathered the censure documents and placed them on top of the pile. The Mueller report, the FISA report, the impeachment transcripts. The stack was now a tower of evidence. Soldiers who violate their oaths face court-martial, she said. They face dishonorable discharge. They face prison. You violated your oath. You lied to America. You leaked secrets. You abused your power. And your punishment was a promotion. That is the rot at the heart of this city, Senator, she said. And today, we are cutting it out. The hearing room was now a graveyard of Adam Schiff's political career. The documents piled on the witness table stood as physical monuments to a legacy of deception. But Tulsi Gabbard knew that paper, no matter how damning, was abstract. Documents could be spun. Text could be argued. Death could not. Senator, Tulsi said, her voice shifting from the sharp edge of a prosecutor to the somber tone of a chaplain. We have talked about documents. We have talked about laws. We have talked about the damage you did to the presidency and the Congress. But those are institutions, she said. They can be repaired. I want to talk about what cannot be repaired. She gestured to the gallery behind her. The security officers, sensing the gravity of the moment, stepped aside to allow 3 people to stand. I want to introduce you to the real cost of leaks, Senator. Not the political cost, the human cost. This is Mrs. Carol Martinez, Tulsi said. A woman in her 60s stood up. She wore a simple black dress and a gold star pin on her lapel. She held a framed photograph of a young man in an army uniform, smiling, his arm draped over a Humvee. Her son, Specialist David Martinez, was killed in Iraq in 2006, Tulsi said. He was 22 years old. Tulsi picked up a redacted after-action report from the table. David was part of a convoy in Anbar province. On October 18th, his unit was ambushed en route Mobile. The insurgents knew the route. They knew the timing. They knew the security protocols. She looked at Schiff. The investigation determined that operational details regarding the convoy schedules had been leaked to the press in a story about failing security situations. The enemy read our newspapers, Senator. They set up an IED based on that information. David died instantly, Tulsi said, along with Corporal James Wu and Private Michael Sanchez. Mrs. Martinez looked at Schiff. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared at him with the hollow, haunted eyes of a mother who has buried her child. Someone back in Washington thought it was important to get a scoop, Tulsi said quietly. Someone thought leaking classified assessments about troop vulnerabilities would score political points. And David paid for it, Tulsi signaled to the next person. A man in his 40s, leaning heavily on a cane, his face scarred. This is Mr. Rashid Ahmadi, Tulsi introduced. He worked with U.S. forces in Iraq as an interpreter. He risked his life every day to help us. He believed in America. In 2012, Tulsi narrated, a story appeared in the American press detailing CIA operations in his sector. It mentioned sources by name. It mentioned Mr. Ahmadi. Mr. Ahmadi managed to escape, she said, but his family didn't. Militias found them the day after the story ran, Tulsi said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. They executed his brother. They arrested his sister. His parents disappeared and have never been found. Mr. Ahmadi looked at Schiff. I lost everything, he said, his voice heavily accented and filled with pain. Because someone wanted a headline. Mr. Ahmadi sacrificed his family for this country, Senator. Mrs. Martinez sacrificed her son. She pointed to the third witness, a man in a wheelchair wearing a dress uniform with the stars of a colonel. Colonel Ramirez, Tulsi said, battalion commander during the surge. He lost 7 soldiers in 2 tours to ambushes that intelligence later confirmed were facilitated by compromised information. 7 flag-draped coffins, Senator. 7 letters home to parents. Tulsi leaned over the table, her eyes burning. These are the stakes, she said. This is what happens when you play games with classified information. It isn't a game to them. It isn't a cable news hit. It is blood. But you never thought about that, did you? When you authorized those leaks against Trump, she said, tapping the FBI 302 document. When your staffer said, don't worry, we won't get caught. Did you think about David Martinez? Did you think about Mr. Ahmadi's sister? No, she answered for him. You thought about your poll numbers. You thought about your next appearance on CNN. She stood up, towering over the table. The question hit the room like a physical blow. Mrs. Martinez sacrificed her future. Mr. Ahmadi sacrificed his past. Colonel Ramirez sacrificed his legs. What did you give? Schiff sat frozen. He looked at Mrs. Martinez, then quickly looked away, unable to bear the weight of her grief. He looked at the cameras, but there was no refuge there. Did you lose sleep? Tulsi asked. Did you lose a paycheck? Did you lose a promotion? No, she spat. You gained. You built a career on the corpses of the truth, and you didn't care who got hurt along the way as long as you got to be the chairman. She gathered the photos of the fallen soldiers that she had placed on the table earlier. She stacked them reverently, protecting them from the taint of the man sitting across from her. Soldiers go to prison for leaking because we know the cost, she said. We know that secrets protect lives. You leaked because you thought you were above the cost. You aren't a public servant, Senator, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried the force of a judgment. You are a parasite. You feed on the sacrifice of better men and women, and you give nothing back but lies. The silence in the room was absolute. The witnesses sat down slowly. The testimony was over. The moral indictment was complete. And Adam Schiff was left with the ghosts of the people his politics had destroyed. The revelation of the phone logs had sucked the air out of the room. The firewall between Nancy Pelosi's legislative power and her husband's trading portfolio hadn't just been breached. It had been exposed as a fiction. But Tulsi Gabbard wasn't finished. She moved the phone records to the evidence stack, which was growing alarmingly high on the witness table. She reached for the third folder. This one was black. It carried the seal of the Director of National Intelligence. Madam Speaker, Tulsi said, her tone shifting from the sharp accusation of a prosecutor to the grave seriousness of an intelligence officer. We have discussed your greed. We have discussed your domestic corruption. But there is a darker chapter to your portfolio. We need to talk about China. Pelosi stiffened. I have always been a critic of the Chinese Communist Party. I visited Tiananmen Square. I held up a banner. That was 1991. Tulsi cut in. That was theater. Let's talk about 2024. Let's talk about the reality of the threat we face. Tulsi opened the black folder. As the Director of National Intelligence, I have access to the raw threat assessments regarding the People's Republic of China. I see what they are doing to our cyber infrastructure. I see their espionage efforts. I see their military buildup. China is the single greatest strategic threat to the United States. And yet, Tulsi said, your family has been doing business with them for decades. She pulled out a flow chart detailing business connections. Let's talk about your son, Paul Pelosi Jr. While you were Speaker of the House, negotiating trade deals and tariffs, your son was involved in multiple business ventures with deep ties to Chinese entities. He was appointed to the board of a company involved in telecommunications and energy, sectors that the CCP tightly controls. He was the second largest shareholder in a Chinese tech company. Tulsi looked up. Why does the son of the Speaker of the House need Chinese business partners? What expertise does he bring to the table? Or is he bringing access? Is he bringing the family name? Pelosi's voice trembled. Leave my children out of this! You brought them into it when you let them trade on your name, Tulsi countered. Hunter Biden, Paul Pelosi Jr. It is the same playbook. The children of the elite act as the bagmen for foreign adversaries who want to buy influence. But it isn't just your son, Tulsi continued. It is the company you keep. She pulled out a photograph of Pelosi standing next to Senator Dianne Feinstein. Senator Feinstein was your closest ally in California politics. She was the chair of the Senate Intelligence Committee. And for 20 years, 2 decades, her personal driver was a spy for the Chinese Ministry of State Security. The room murmured. It was a scandal that Washington had tried desperately to bury. He was in her car, Tulsi said. He was in her office. He heard her phone calls. He knew her schedule. For 20 years, a Chinese spy had direct access to the Senate Intelligence Chair. When this was revealed, Tulsi said, pointing at Pelosi, you didn't demand an investigation. You didn't demand a damage assessment. You defended her. You called it an unfortunate situation. You downplayed one of the greatest counterintelligence failures in American history. Why? Was it because you were afraid of what an investigation might find in your own office? Tulsi pulled out a voting record analysis. Your record on China is a study in performative opposition and substantive capitulation, Tulsi said. You talk tough on human rights, which costs China nothing. But when it comes to trade, when it comes to supply chains, when it comes to stopping them from buying American farmland, you are strangely silent. You opposed President Trump's tariffs, calling them harmful. You have consistently voted to allow Chinese integration into our markets. And, coincidentally, Tulsi noted dryly, your husband's portfolio is heavy on companies that rely on Chinese manufacturing. Apple, Tesla, Nvidia. You are betting on China's economy, Madam Speaker. You are financially aligned with our adversary. Tulsi leaned forward, her expression hardening into righteous anger. But here is the ultimate hypocrisy. For years, you and your allies, Hillary Clinton, Adam Schiff, the media, you called me a Russian asset. You smeared me. You called a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army a traitor because I dared to question your regime change wars. There was zero evidence, Tulsi said. None. I have been vetted by the military. I have a top-secret clearance. I have served in combat. But you let that lie stand. You benefited from it. And yet, Tulsi said, gesturing to the documents, Here you are. Your son is doing business in Beijing. Your best friend employed a Chinese spy. Your husband is betting on Chinese supply chains. I am not the asset, Madam Speaker. You are the compromised asset. This is what projection looks like, Tulsi said. You accuse your enemies of exactly what you are guilty of. Chinese intelligence services target American politicians. They look for leverage. They look for greed. They look for vanity. Tulsi looked at the frail woman in the expensive suit. And when they look at you, Madam Speaker, they see an open door. You sold out your country for a seat at the table with the global elite. And now, as we face the possibility of conflict in the Pacific, we have to wonder, whose side are you really on? The American people need a leader who is ready to stand up to Beijing, Tulsi concluded. Not a leader whose family payroll is stamped with the seal of the CCP. The room was silent, save for the hum of the cameras. The accusation of foreign compromise hung heavy in the air, a poisonous cloud that Pelosi seemed unable to wave away. She sat slumped in her chair, her defiance eroding into exhaustion. But Tulsi Gabbard was not done. She had dismantled the financial corruption. She had exposed the foreign entanglement. Now, she was bringing the fight home. Madam Speaker, Tulsi said, closing the black folder. We have talked about your global dealings. Now let's talk about your backyard. You held the highest office in the legislative branch. You were responsible for the safety of the Capitol. And you are responsible for the district you represent. Let's talk about January 6th. Pelosi's head snapped up. This was her territory. She had built her entire post-presidency narrative around that day. That was an insurrection, incited by Donald Trump. It was a security failure, Tulsi corrected, her voice ice-cold. A failure that happened on your watch. She pulled out a timeline document stamped with the seal of the Capitol Police. You were the Speaker of the House. The Sergeant-at-Arms reported to you. The Capitol Police Chief reported to you. The security of the complex was your ultimate responsibility. In the days leading up to January 6th, Tulsi read, intelligence agencies warned of a massive crowd. They warned of potential violence. The FBI knew. DHS knew. President Trump authorized the National Guard, Tulsi said. He offered up to 20,000 troops to secure the perimeter. The Department of Defense asked if you wanted them. You said no. Why? Tulsi asked. The official record says you were concerned about optics. You didn't want the Capitol to look like an armed fortress. You were worried about the image. But looking at the text messages, Tulsi said, holding up a printout of redacted communications, it looks like you wanted a confrontation. You deliberately understaffed the police. You left them vulnerable. You rejected the support that would have prevented the breach entirely. And then, Tulsi said, her voice dropping, when the chaos happened, you had a documentary crew filming you. Who brings a film crew to a crisis, Madam Speaker? A politician who sees an opportunity? You used that day, Tulsi accused. You used the violence. You used the fear. You impeached a president without a hearing. You set up a show trial committee. You weaponized the Justice Department. But you destroyed your own communications, Tulsi noted. You refused to turn over your own phone records regarding the security decisions. You exempted yourself from the investigation. 5 people died in connection with that day, Tulsi said. Ashley Babbitt was shot and killed. Officer Sicknick died. And you used their deaths as political props. You failed to protect the Capitol because you were too busy planning how to use the failure to destroy your enemies. Tulsi set the papers down and picked up a tablet. But your failure isn't limited to D.C., she said. Let's look at the city you have represented for 38 years. Let's look at San Francisco. She tapped the screen, and the monitors in the hearing room flickered to life. Images of San Francisco appeared. Not the Golden Gate Bridge, not the painted ladies. Instead, the screen showed rows of tents blocking sidewalks. It showed open-air drug markets in the Tenderloin, where addicts injected fentanyl in broad daylight. It showed smash-and-grab robberies stripping luxury stores bare. "This is your legacy, Madam Speaker," Tulsi said. "This is the district of one of the most powerful women in the world. 75,000 people left your city in 3 years," Tulsi cited. "That is 10% of the population. They are fleeing. Businesses are closing. Nordstrom, Whole Foods, Walgreens. They are locking the doors because the crime is out of control." "There are apps on phones now," Tulsi said with disgust, "that map human feces on the sidewalks so tourists don't step in it. You have been the representative since 1987. You have brought billions of dollars in pork barrel spending to your district. And yet, it looks like a third-world country." "But not your neighborhood," Tulsi noted. She swiped the screen. An image of a massive white mansion appeared. It sat on a hill, surrounded by manicured hedges and high-security gates. "This is your home in Pacific Heights," Tulsi said. "Worth $25 million. No tents here, no needles here, no crime here. You live behind walls while your constituents live in squalor." And then Tulsi played the video that would end the argument. April 2020. The height of the COVID pandemic. Small businesses were crushed. People were losing their jobs. Americans were terrified, locked in their homes, unable to go to work or funerals. The video played. It showed Nancy Pelosi standing in her massive, gleaming kitchen. She was showing off her sub-zero refrigerators. "We have chocolate. We have candy. We have all this ice cream," the video Pelosi chirped, pulling open the freezer drawer to reveal row after row of Jenny's splendid ice cream. Pints that cost $12 each. The silence in the hearing room was deafening. The juxtaposition was nauseating. $24,000 worth of refrigerators, Tulsi said, her voice heavy with contempt, filled with luxury ice cream. While the people you represent were waiting in bread lines, while business owners were committing suicide because they lost everything, while children were starving. "Let them eat ice cream," Tulsi said. "That was your message. You are so disconnected from the suffering of the American people that you thought that video was charming. You thought it was relatable." "It wasn't relatable," Tulsi said. "It was repulsive. It showed the world exactly who you are. You are an aristocrat living in a palace, looking down on the peasants. You have failed the capital," Tulsi concluded. "You have failed your city. You have failed your constituents. You have accumulated wealth while your district crumbled. You have accumulated power while the country burned. That is not leadership, Madam Speaker. That is parasitism." Pelosi was shaking, her eyes wet, her hands clutching a tissue. The image of the ice cream, played against the backdrop of her ruined city, was a visual indictment she could not escape. The grande dame of the Democratic Party had been revealed as a Marie Antoinette for the modern age. The hearing room felt less like a legislative chamber and more like a hospital waiting room where a family is forced to have a difficult conversation with an aging relative. The aggression of the financial and security accusations had faded, replaced by a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Tulsi Gabbard closed the folder on China. She closed the folder on San Francisco. She reached for the final folder, which was thin, unadorned, and perhaps the most devastating of all. "Madam Speaker," Tulsi said, her voice dropping to a register that was almost gentle, though the words were anything but. "We have discussed your corruption. We have discussed your greed. We have discussed your failures. But now we must discuss the reason you are still here. We need to talk about the dynasty. And we need to talk about the decline." Nancy Pelosi sat across from her, surrounded by a fortress of lawyers and aides, but for the first time, she looked truly alone. Her hands were shaking visibly now, a tremor that rattled the papers on the table. She reached for her water glass, her grip uncertain, requiring 2 hands to lift it to her lips. "You have been in Washington since 1987, Tulsi said. "You are the daughter of Thomas D'Alessandro, Jr., a mayor of Baltimore, and a congressman. You were born into the machine. You were raised in the machine. And you became the machine. You built a political dynasty," Tulsi said. "Not through ideas, but through access. We talked about your husband. We talked about your son. But it is the culture of nepotism you represent that is the poison in the groundwater of this city. You believe that power is an inheritance," Tulsi said. "You believe that seats in Congress are family heirlooms to be protected and passed down, not temporary trusts granted by the people." Tulsi leaned forward, clasping her hands. "But dynasties fall, Madam Speaker, and yours is collapsing under the weight of time. You are 84 years old." The number hung in the air. In a city obsessed with decorum, stating a powerful person's age as an accusation was the ultimate taboo. But Tulsi had already broken every other rule. She wasn't stopping now. "You are the oldest person to ever serve as Speaker of the House," Tulsi said. "You are older than the State of Israel. You are older than the invention of the nuclear bomb. You are an octogenarian holding onto the reins of a nuclear superpower. And the American people are watching the decline in real time." Tulsi signaled to the screen. She didn't need to say much. The images were seared into the national consciousness. "The freeze!" The video played. It showed Pelosi at a press conference, mid-sentence, suddenly stopping. Her eyes went blank. Her mouth remained open. For several agonizing seconds, she was simply gone. A computer rebooting, a mind disconnecting from reality. The confusion! Another clip. Pelosi referring to Donald Trump as President Bush. Once, twice, 3 times. Looking around the room, confused about the timeline, confused about the adversary. The slur. A compilation of recent speeches where words ran together, where syntax collapsed, where the once sharp orator struggled to form coherent thoughts. Tulsi stopped the video. She didn't let it run too long. The point was made, and cruelty wasn't the objective. Reality was. "This is not a partisan attack," Tulsi said quietly. "This is a biological reality. Time comes for us all, Madam Speaker. It will come for me. It has come for you. But the difference is, most people retire. Most people step aside with dignity. They pass the torch to a new generation. They recognize that they can no longer do the job. You refuse. You cling to power with a desperation that is painful to watch," Tulsi said. "You run for re-election at 84 years old. You announce you are running again at 86. Is it because you have new ideas? No. We haven't heard a new idea from you in 20 years. Is it because the country needs you? No. The country is crying out for change. You stay," Tulsi accused, "because without the power, you are just an elderly woman with a lot of unexplained money. You stay because the seat protects the portfolio. You stay because you are addicted to the relevance. This is the gerontocracy, Tulsi declared, a ruling class of the ancient and the entrenched. You, Mitch McConnell, Joe Biden, Dianne Feinstein, you held hands and refused to let go, turning the United States Capitol into a nursing home for the elite. You blocked the path for an entire generation of leaders, Tulsi said. You suffocated the future to extend your own present. I am 43 years old, Tulsi said. I am a combat veteran. I have energy. I have clarity. I walked away from power because I have principles. You have none of those things left. You have become a symbol of stagnation, Tulsi said, a living monument to the refusal to let go. When Senator Feinstein was clearly incapacitated, you defended her. You propped her up. You weakened at Bernie's Ed the Senate Intelligence Committee because you were terrified of the precedent. You were terrified that if they came for her, they would come for you next. Well, Madam Speaker, Tulsi said, we are here. The decline is visible. The incapacity is documented. The frailty is undeniable. You can barely hold the papers in front of you, Tulsi noted, looking at Pelosi's shaking hands. How can we trust you to hold the Constitution? It is not ageism to demand competence, Tulsi said. It is not sexism to demand vigor. It is patriotism. You have had your time. You have had 38 years. You have had the gavel. You have had the money. You have had the fame. But you don't know when to leave the party, Tulsi said. And now the lights are coming on, and the room looks ugly. Pelosi looked down, her face crumbling. The attack on her competence was the one blow she could not deflect with a lawyer or a press release. It was an attack on her identity. She opened her mouth to speak, to offer some defense of her experience, but the words wouldn't come. The sharp retort, the legendary wit, it was gone, lost in the fog of 84 years. You represent the past, Madam Speaker, Tulsi said, her voice filled with a cold finality. A corrupt, profitable, stagnant past. But the country is dying for a future. The hearing room was silent, but it was a different kind of silence than the one that had started the morning. At the beginning, the silence had been tense, electric with anticipation. Now, it was heavy, funereal. It was the silence of an ending. Nancy Pelosi sat in the witness chair, but she seemed to have shrunk. The designer suit looked too big for her shoulders. The reading glasses slipped down her nose. Her staff, usually aggressive and protective, stood awkwardly against the wall, looking at their shoes. They knew, as political operatives, that there was no spin that could fix this. They had watched a political autopsy performed on a living patient. Tulsi Gabbard stood up. She gathered the folders, the blue folder of insider trading, the red folder of war profiteering, the black folder of China, the timeline of the decline. She stacked them into a neat tower on the witness table, a physical monument to decades of corruption. She didn't sit back down. She stood tall, her military posture contrasting sharply with the slumped figure across from her. Madam Speaker, Tulsi said, her voice ringing out for the final summation, we have spent the last hour reviewing the ledger of your career. We have seen the insider trading, the statistical impossibilities, the phone logs showing you calling your husband minutes after classified briefings, the $30 million in profit made while you killed the legislation that would have stopped it. We have seen the war profiteering, the vote to send my generation to Iraq, the lies about the intelligence, the defense stocks bought by your husband before the bombs fell, the blood money that built your fortune. We have seen the foreign compromise, the son doing business in China, the spy in your best friend's car, the softness on Beijing while your family profited. We have seen the domestic failure, the security collapse of January 6th, the destruction of San Francisco, the ice cream in the $24,000 fridge while your constituents starved. And we have seen the decline, the cognitive failure, the refusal to yield. Tulsi paused, looking directly into the camera, addressing the nation over Pelosi's head. This is not just about one politician, Tulsi said. This is about a system that has been captured by a permanent political class. A class that believes they are above the law. A class that believes public service is a path to private wealth. A class that believes they are entitled to rule until their dying breath. She looked down at Pelosi. You are the face of that system, Madam Speaker. You represent everything that Americans hate about Washington. The entitlement, the greed, the hypocrisy, the stagnation. I am a soldier, Tulsi said. In the military, we have a code. Leaders eat last. Leaders sacrifice first. Leaders are responsible for everything their unit does or fails to do. You eat first. You sacrifice nothing. And you take responsibility for nothing. You have failed the test of leadership. Tulsi took a breath, preparing to deliver the final verdict. The committee chairman asked for my recommendations, Tulsi said, turning to the dais. Here they are. First, I recommend the Department of Justice open an immediate criminal investigation into Paul Pelosi's trading activity for violations of the Stock Act and federal securities fraud. Second, I recommend a full forensic audit of the Pelosi family's foreign business dealings, specifically regarding entities linked to the Chinese Communist Party. Third, I recommend the release of all unredacted communications regarding the security failures of January 6th. She turned back to Pelosi. But my final recommendation is not for the committee. It is for you. Retire. Step down, Madam Speaker. Do it today. Do it while you still have a shred of dignity left. You are 84 years old. You are visibly unwell. You are compromised by your own corruption. You are no longer capable of serving the American people. Go home to San Francisco, Tulsi said. Go to your mansion. Eat your ice cream. Enjoy the millions you made off of our backs. But get out of the way. Get out of the way of the new generation. Get out of the way of leaders who understand the cost of war. Get out of the way of leaders who won't sell out their country for a stock tip. You have held the gavel for too long, Tulsi said. Your watch is over. Nancy Pelosi tried to stand. Her legs shook. Her aides rushed forward, grabbing her elbows, steadying her. She looked at Tulsi, her eyes filled with tears and fury. But she couldn't speak. The cognitive fog and the weight of the evidence had silenced the most powerful woman in Democratic politics. It is time to go, Nancy, Tulsi said, using her first name for the first time, stripping away the title, leaving only the person. It is over. Tulsi Gabbard picked up her single folder. She turned and walked toward the door. She moved with the energy of youth, the confidence of the truth, and the stride of a soldier who had completed the mission. Behind her, the cameras captured the final image of the hearing. Nancy Pelosi, slumped and supported by handlers, looking small, old, and defeated amidst the ruins of her legacy. The contrast was absolute. The future had walked out the door, and the past was left struggling to stand up. The committee chairman banged the gavel, a hollow sound that signaled the end of the hearing, and perhaps the end of an era.